My name is John Miller, and I'm 34 years old. I never thought I'd be telling this story to anyone, let alone writing it down. But after what happened to me, I know I have to share it. I have to tell you what I saw, what I heard, and what Jesus told me about what's coming to our world. I was just a regular soldier, you know? Nothing special about me. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, went to church sometimes with my mom when I was little, but I wasn't what you'd call a religious man. I believed in God, sure, but it was more like background noise in my life. I had my job, my buddies, my routine. I thought I had everything figured out, but God had other plans for me. Before we continue, please let me know where you're listening from. It would be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like. It will help this video to reach so many people who need to listen to this testimony, and leave a comment. Share your thoughts about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other here on this channel, and don't forget to subscribe for more of this content coming your way. Enjoy listening. It was March 15th when we got the call. Our unit was being deployed to Iran for what they called a routine reconnaissance mission. Nothing routine about it, as it turned out. We were supposed to gather intelligence on some suspected weapons facilities near the border. Standard stuff, they said. In and out, quick and clean. I remember packing my gear that morning, calling my wife Sarah and my 2 kids, Tommy, who's 8, and little Emma. She's only 5. I told them Daddy would be back soon, just like I always did. Sarah's voice was tight with worry, but she tried to sound brave for the kids. "Be careful, John," she whispered into the phone. "We need you to come home." I had no idea those might be the last words I'd hear from her for a while. The flight over was long and tense. My buddy Marcus sat next to me, cracking jokes like he always did when he was nervous. We'd been through 3 deployments together, and I trusted him with my life. The whole team was solid guys I'd served with for years. We thought we were prepared for anything. We landed at a forward operating base just as the sun was setting. The briefing was quick and to the point. Intelligence suggested the facility we were targeting was more heavily fortified than initially thought. But we had our orders and we were trained for this. What could go wrong? The explosion happened at 0347 hours. I know because I was checking my watch when the world went white. We'd been moving through the facility for about 20 minutes. Everything going according to plan. Marcus was on point. I was covering the rear, when suddenly the whole building shook like an earthquake. The next thing I knew, there was this blinding flash and a sound like the world was being torn apart. The blast threw me backward through a concrete wall. I felt my ribs crack, felt something warm running down my face. My ears were ringing so loud I couldn't hear my own thoughts. When the dust settled, I was trapped under a pile of rubble, and I could taste blood in my mouth. I tried to call out for Marcus, for any of my team, but no sound came. That's when I realized how bad it was. I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't move my arms. There was this crushing weight on my chest, and every breath felt like drowning. I lay there in the darkness, feeling my life slipping away like water through my fingers. The pain was beyond anything I'd ever experienced, but underneath it was something worse. This cold, creeping knowledge that I was dying. Really dying. That's when I started to pray. Not the kind of casual prayers I'd mumbled in church as a kid, but desperate, raw prayers from a man who suddenly understood he was about to meet his maker. "God," I whispered with what might have been my last breath. "If you're real, if you're there, please, my family needs me. Please don't let me die like this." Then something incredible happened. The pain just stopped. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. I felt this strange lightness, like I was floating, and suddenly I could see myself lying there in the rubble. It was the weirdest thing. I was looking down at my own body, broken, bloody, barely breathing, but I felt more alive than I'd ever felt in my life. I could see the whole scene from above. The destroyed building, the smoke, the fires burning in the distance. I could see my teammates scattered around, some moving, some not. It broke my heart to see Marcus lying so still. But I wasn't scared anymore. There was this incredible peace washing over me, like being wrapped in the warmest blanket you can imagine. I tried to go back to my body, tried to will myself back into it, but I couldn't. It was like I was tethered to it by this silver cord, but I was being pulled away higher and higher. The earth got smaller beneath me until I could see the whole Middle East spread out like a map. Then the whole planet, beautiful and blue and fragile looking against the black of space. But I wasn't heading into space. I was heading somewhere else entirely. That's when I saw it, this field of light stretching out in every direction. It wasn't like sunlight or electric light or anything I could compare it to. It was alive somehow, warm and welcoming and full of, I don't know how to describe it. Love, maybe? Pure, perfect love. As I got closer, I could see that the light was actually made up of countless beings, all glowing with that same beautiful radiance. They were singing, but not with voices. It was like their whole beings were creating this harmony that went right through you and filled up every empty space in your soul. Some of them turned to look at me as I passed, and their faces were so full of joy and peace that I started crying. Good tears, though. Tears of relief and homecoming and recognition, even though I'd never seen any of them before. The further I went into this field of light, the stronger that feeling got, like I was finally where I was supposed to be, like everything in my whole life had been leading me to this moment. The worries and fears and petty concerns that had weighed me down my whole life just fell away like old clothes. At the center of this field of light, I saw him. I knew immediately who it was, even though he didn't look like any of the pictures I'd seen in Sunday school. He was tall and strong, with these eyes that seemed to see right through you, not in a scary way, but in a way that made you feel completely known and completely loved at the same time. The light that came from him was different from the others, brighter, but somehow gentler too. It didn't hurt to look at, but you could feel its power. When he smiled at me, it was like the sun coming up after the longest night of your life. "John," he said, and his voice was like music and thunder and the whisper of wind all at once. "Welcome home, my son." I tried to speak, tried to tell him how sorry I was for all the times I'd ignored him, all the times I'd put other things first, but he just shook his head and opened his arms. When he hugged me, it was like every good thing that had ever happened to me rolled into one moment. I felt forgiven, accepted, loved beyond measure. "Lord," I finally managed to say, "I'm not worthy to be here. I haven't been the man I should have been." He looked at me with those incredible eyes and said, "John, worthiness isn't about what you've done. It's about what I've done for you. And I chose you for this moment long before you were born." Jesus led me to this place that looked like a garden, but more beautiful than any garden on earth. The colors were more vivid. The air was sweet with fragrances I'd never smelled before, and there was this sense of perfect peace that settled over everything. We sat by this stream of crystal clear water, and Jesus turned to me with a serious expression. "John, I brought you here for a purpose. What I'm about to show you and tell you is not easy to hear, but it's necessary. The world is at a crossroads, and my people need to know what's coming so they can prepare." My heart started beating faster, even though I wasn't sure I still had a physical heart. "What do you mean, Lord?" "I'm going to show you visions of what's coming to earth," he said. "Some of it will be difficult to watch, but remember, even in the darkest times, I am still sovereign. I am still in control, and there is still hope for those who will turn to me and pray." He reached out and touched my forehead, and suddenly my mind was flooded with images, feelings, knowledge that I couldn't have gotten any other way. It was like watching a movie, but I could feel the emotions of the people in it, could understand things that weren't being said out loud. "Are you ready, John?" Jesus asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was ready for anything, but I trusted him completely. The first vision hit me like a punch to the gut. I saw the earth from space again, but this time it looked different, darker. There were these swirling clouds of what looked like spiritual darkness moving across continents like storm fronts. "What am I seeing, Lord?" I asked. The spiritual atmosphere over the earth, Jesus replied. Look closer. As I focused, I could see into the darkness. There were beings in there, not angels, but something else. Something twisted and evil. They were moving with purpose, organizing, preparing for something big. Demons, Jesus said simply. They know their time is short, so they're working harder than ever to deceive and destroy. They're influencing world leaders, stirring up hatred and division, preparing the way for what's coming. I watched in horror as I saw how these dark beings whispered in the ears of politicians, generals, religious leaders. Most of the people couldn't see them, couldn't hear them, but they were being influenced anyway. Wars were being planned, alliances were being broken, trust between nations was crumbling. It's getting worse, isn't it? I asked. Jesus nodded sadly. Much worse. But John, this is why prayer is so crucial right now. Every prayer from a faithful heart pushes back that darkness. Every intercession creates light in the spiritual realm. My people have more power than they realize, if they would only use it. The next vision made me want to run and hide. I saw missiles launching from different countries, not just one or two, but dozens, then hundreds. The sky was crisscrossed with contrails as nuclear weapons flew toward their targets. I watched cities I recognized disappear in blinding flashes. I saw the mushroom clouds rising over what used to be homes and schools and churches. I saw the electromagnetic pulses that followed, shutting down power grids, communications, everything that modern society depends on. But the worst part was seeing the people. Families huddled in basements, children crying for parents who would never come home, hospitals overflowing with radiation victims. The fear in their eyes, the desperation, the hopelessness. When will this happen, Lord? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Sooner than most people think, Jesus said. The leaders of several nations are already making the preparations. They think they can control it, limit it, but they don't understand the forces they're playing with. Once it starts, it will escalate quickly. I saw flashes of specific places. Major cities reduced to rubble, agricultural areas contaminated for decades, entire regions becoming uninhabitable. The death toll was beyond anything in human history. Can it be stopped? I asked desperately. Jesus looked at me with those compassionate eyes. It can be delayed, can be lessened. The prayers of my people have that power. But John, most of my church is asleep. They're worried about comfort and prosperity instead of crying out for mercy. They don't understand what's at stake. That's when Jesus showed me something that gave me hope. I saw people all over the world, in churches, in homes, in secret places, dropping to their knees in prayer. And as they prayed, I could see actual changes happening in the spiritual realm. Watch, Jesus said. I saw a woman in China, praying in her small apartment for her country's leaders. As she prayed, light began to push back the darkness around the government building in Beijing. I saw a group of men in Nigeria, fasting and interceding for peace in their region. Their prayers created a barrier of light that stopped a planned terrorist attack. This is what my people don't understand, Jesus said. Prayer isn't just asking for things. It's warfare. It's releasing my power into impossible situations. It's partnering with me to change the course of history. I watched as prayers from faithful believers created these networks of light across the earth. Where there was intense, focused prayer, the darkness retreated. Where there was apathy or lukewarm faith, the darkness advanced. Every prayer matters, John. Every cry for mercy, every plea for wisdom for world leaders, every intercession for peace, they all make a difference. The problem is, there aren't enough people praying with the urgency this situation requires. I saw what could happen if just a fraction more believers understood this truth and began to pray with real fervency. I saw wars being prevented, leaders having changes of heart, evil plans being exposed and stopped. The power was there, available, waiting to be accessed. Jesus then pulled back the curtain on something that shook me to my core. He showed me the spiritual battles happening behind every major world event. Most people think politics is about economics or power or ideology, he said. They don't realize there's a war going on in the heavenly realms that determines what happens on earth. I watched as demonic principalities assigned to different nations worked to manipulate their leaders into making decisions that would lead to conflict. I saw how hatred and division were being systematically sown through media, through education, through entertainment. But I also saw God's angels, magnificent and powerful, working to protect and guide those who were seeking truth. I watched battles in the heavenly places that made any earthly war look like a children's game. The enemy's goal is chaos, Jesus explained. He wants to destroy as many lives as possible before my return. He's using human pride, fear, and greed to accomplish his purposes. But he can only operate where he's given permission through sin, through prayerlessness, through people turning away from me. I saw how every act of genuine love, every moment of authentic worship, every prayer offered in faith strengthened the forces of light, and how every act of hatred, every rejection of truth, every embrace of selfishness strengthened the forces of darkness. This is why the church must wake up, Jesus said urgently. This isn't a time for business as usual. This is a time for my people to understand their authority and use it. What Jesus showed me next broke my heart. I saw churches all over the world, but many of them were dark spiritually. Not because the people were evil, but because they'd lost sight of their purpose. Look at my bride, Jesus said sadly. See how she's become distracted. I saw congregations focused on building programs instead of building faith. I saw pastors more concerned with attendance numbers than with spiritual maturity. I saw believers arguing about secondary issues while the world burned around them. But then he showed me the remnant churches and individual believers who got it. They were praying with desperation, fasting regularly, understanding the times they were living in. These churches glowed with spiritual light, and their prayers were like beacons pushing back the darkness. The church I'm calling forth isn't about denominations or buildings, Jesus said. It's about hearts that are fully surrendered to me, people who understand that we're in the final stages of human history. These are my true warriors. I watched as these faithful believers began to connect with each other across denominational lines, across national borders. They were forming prayer networks, sharing intelligence about what God was showing them, coordinating their intercession. This is my end times army, Jesus said with pride in his voice. Not armed with weapons of war, but with the weapons of worship and prayer and love. They will do greater things than even my first disciples did. Wait, I need to correct something here. Jesus didn't give a commission to Blake. He gave it to me, John Miller. Let me tell you what he said. Jesus looked directly into my eyes with an intensity that went right through me. John, I'm sending you back with a message. You're going to tell people what you've seen here, what I've shown you about what's coming. Many won't believe you. Some will think you're crazy. But some will hear and respond, and that's all I need. My heart sank. I didn't want to go back. Being in his presence was the most wonderful thing I'd ever experienced, and the thought of leaving it behind was almost unbearable. Lord, I'm not a preacher, I protested. I'm just a soldier. I don't know how to talk to people about this stuff. Can't you send someone else? Jesus smiled gently. John, I don't call the equipped, I equip the called. Your background as a soldier is exactly what I need. You understand warfare, you understand following orders, you understand sacrifice. And you've seen enough of life to know that people need hope. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt strength flowing into me. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to be faithful. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them what I've told you. Tell them there's still time to pray, still time to make a difference. But what if they don't listen? I asked. That's not your responsibility, Jesus replied. Your responsibility is to deliver the message. Whether they receive it or not is between them and me. But John, I promise you this, for every person who hears and responds, for every prayer warrior who awakens because of your testimony, you will see the fruit in eternity." Then Jesus showed me something that filled me with hope and excitement. I saw believers all around the world receiving similar visions, similar messages. Some through dreams, some through angelic visitations, some through prophetic words from other believers. "I'm raising up an army of intercessors," Jesus explained. "People who will pray like the world depends on it, because it does. They're going to pray for world leaders by name, pray against the plans of the enemy, pray for my return and my kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven." I watched as this prayer army began to form. They met in homes, in churches, online. They shared what God was showing them, coordinated their prayers, covered different regions and situations. And as they prayed, I could see the spiritual atmosphere beginning to change. "This is how the Great Commission gets completed," Jesus said. "Not just through preaching, but through praying. These intercessors will clear the way spiritually for the final harvest of souls." I saw revival breaking out in unexpected places, in communist countries, in Muslim nations, in secular societies. But it wasn't happening through big crusades or famous preachers. It was happening through ordinary believers who had learned to pray with extraordinary faith. "The enemy thought he had the church neutralized," Jesus said with a smile. "He thought he could distract my people with comfort and entertainment and prosperity. But I'm waking up my warriors, and they're going to turn the tide." As wonderful as this vision was, the thought of leaving heaven was becoming unbearable. I fell to my knees before Jesus and begged him to let me stay. "Lord, please," I said, tears flowing freely. "I've never felt peace like this. I've never felt love like this. My body is broken down there. I probably won't survive anyway. Can't I just stay here with you?" The pain of even considering going back to earth was overwhelming. Here in heaven, there was no war, no fear, no hatred, no death. Here I was complete, whole, perfect. Down there, I would have to face pain and rejection and struggle. "I know it's hard to understand," Jesus said gently, kneeling down beside me. "But John, your work isn't finished. Your family needs you. The world needs the message I'm giving you. And I need someone who has seen what you've seen to warn my people about what's coming." "But I don't want to leave you," I sobbed. "What if I mess up? What if I forget what you've shown me? What if I get distracted by life down there and fail to deliver your message?" Jesus lifted my chin so I was looking directly into his eyes. "John, do you think I would bring you all this way just to let you fail? I will be with you every step of the way. When you speak about what you've seen here, I will give you the words. When people reject your message, I will comfort you. When you feel overwhelmed by the darkness in the world, I will remind you of the light you've seen." He paused, then added, "And John, this isn't goodbye forever. You've seen your eternal home now. You know what's waiting for you. This separation is temporary, but the impact you can make with this message could last for eternity." Jesus stood up and helped me to my feet. His expression became more serious, more urgent. "John, I need you to understand something. Your wife, Sarah, she's been praying for you every day since you deployed. Your children pray for Daddy to come home every night before bed. Their prayers, combined with the prayers of your mother and your church family, have created a pathway for your spirit to return to your body." He showed me a vision of Sarah on her knees beside our bed, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded with God to bring me home safely. I saw Tommy and Emma with their hands folded, asking Jesus to protect their daddy. I saw my mom, who I thought barely believed in God anymore, weeping in her kitchen as she called out to heaven for her son. "Their faith is creating the miracle that will bring you back," Jesus said. "Don't you see? This isn't just about you. It's about showing them that prayer works, that I hear and answer, that I care about families and keep my promises." Then he showed me something else, people around the world who were going to hear my testimony and be changed by it. I I saw a young mother in Germany who would start a prayer group after hearing my story. I saw a businessman in Japan who would give up his lucrative career to become a missionary after being confronted by my account of heaven. I saw children in Africa who would grow up to be mighty prayer warriors because their parents taught them what I had seen. Every person who comes to faith because of your testimony, every prayer warrior who awakens because of your message, every family that draws closer to me because they hear what you've experienced, they're all part of why you must go back. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, but so was the sense of purpose. I finally understood that this wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what the world needed. The journey back to my body was different from the journey to heaven. Instead of peaceful floating, it felt like being pulled through a tunnel at incredible speed. I could see the silver cord that connected me to my physical form getting thicker and stronger as I got closer. Then suddenly, I was back inside my broken body, and the pain hit me like a freight train. But along with the pain came the most wonderful sound I'd ever heard. The whoop 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 of helicopter blades and someone shouting, "We've got a pulse! He's coming back!" I tried to open my eyes, but they felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a groan. But inside, my spirit was soaring because I knew that Jesus had kept his promise. I was alive and I had work to do. The medic leaning over me had tears in his eyes. "Soldier, you've been dead for 17 minutes, he said. "Welcome back to the land of the living." As the helicopter raced toward the medical facility, I could feel Jesus' presence with me just like he had promised. Every time a wave of pain threatened to overwhelm me, I remembered the peace of heaven. Every time fear tried to creep in, I remembered his promise that he would be with me always. "Sarah," I whispered when I finally found my voice. "I need to call Sarah." "Easy there, soldier," the medic said. "We'll get word to your family as soon as we get you stabilized. Right now, just focus on staying with us." But I wasn't worried about staying alive anymore. I had too much to do, too many people to talk to, too important a message to share. Death had no power over me now because I knew who held my life in his hands. During my long recovery in the hospital, I started paying attention to world events in a way I never had before. And everywhere I looked, I could see the signs Jesus had shown me beginning to unfold. The tensions between nations that I'd seen in my vision were playing out on the news every day. Leaders making decisions that seemed designed to provoke conflict rather than prevent it. Ancient grudges being stirred up, alliances shifting in dangerous ways. I watched reports about nuclear weapons programs expanding in multiple countries. I saw stories about cyber attacks on power grids, about space weapons being developed, about new types of chemical and biological weapons. Everything was accelerating exactly as Jesus had shown me. But what worried me most was the spiritual deadness I could see in the church's response. Most believers seemed more concerned about their own comfort than about praying for world peace. Church services focused on feel-good messages rather than calling people to urgent intercession. "Nurse," I said to the kind woman who was checking for one morning, "Do you go to church?" She smiled. "Every Sunday with my family." "Why do you ask? When's the last time your pastor preached about the end times? When's the last time your church had a prayer meeting specifically for world peace?" Her smile faded a little. "Well, we pray for missionaries and the sick and things like that. But world events, I guess we figure that's up to the politicians to handle." That conversation confirmed what Jesus had shown me. The church was asleep at the most critical moment in human history. When I was finally strong enough to talk to the military investigators about what happened during the mission, I made a decision that I knew would change everything. I told them the truth, all of it. The first officer looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Sergeant Miller, you suffered severe trauma and blood loss. Hallucinations and delusions are common in near-death experiences. What you're describing, it's not consistent with reality." "Sir, with all due respect," I replied, "I know the difference between a hallucination and what I experienced. I met Jesus Christ, I saw heaven, and I was given a message that I have to share. The psychiatrist they brought in was kind but skeptical. John, the human brain does remarkable things when it's under extreme stress. What you experienced felt real to you, and I'm not trying to diminish that. But we need to focus on helping you process the trauma and get back to normal life. Normal life. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Doc, there's nothing normal about what's coming to this world. People need to know. They need to pray. They need to prepare spiritually for what's ahead. That's when they recommended I take early medical retirement and suggested ongoing counseling. They were polite about it, but the message was clear. Keep your crazy religious experience to yourself, or your military career is over. Even some of my closest friends struggled with my testimony. Marcus, who had survived the blast with injuries of his own, listened to my story with growing discomfort. Johnny, he said finally, you almost died, man. Your brain was without oxygen for a long time. Don't you think that might explain all this? The rejection hurt, but Jesus had warned me it would happen. And he had also promised that some people would believe, and those were the ones I needed to focus on. When I finally made it home to Sarah and the kids, I knew I had to start somewhere. That first night, after we'd put Tommy and Emma to bed, I sat Sarah down in our living room and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, tears streaming down her face. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. John, she said finally, I felt something when you were over there, the night you were hurt. I woke up at 3 a.m. with this overwhelming urge to pray for you. I prayed for hours, begging God to protect you and bring you home. Around dawn, I felt this incredible peace, like God was telling me you were going to be okay. That's when I knew she believed me, and that's when we started our first prayer meetings. Just the two of us, crying out to God for our nation and our world. Within a month, we had 12 people meeting in our living room every Tuesday night. Within 6 months, we had 3 different groups meeting throughout the week. People were hungry for someone to tell them the truth about what was happening spiritually in our world. We can't just pray generally, I would tell them. We need to pray specifically. Pray for the president by name. Pray for the leaders of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Pray that God would give them wisdom and restrain them from making decisions that would lead to nuclear war. Pray for the church to wake up and take its role seriously. We started getting reports from people in other countries who were having similar experiences, similar calls to prayer. A network was forming, just like Jesus had shown me. But for every person who responded to the call to pray, there seemed to be 100 who just didn't care. And I began to see that this indifference wasn't accidental. It was strategic. The enemy's greatest weapon isn't persecution. I would tell the prayer groups. It's distraction. He keeps people so busy with entertainment, with social media, with making money, with their own problems, that they don't have time to think about eternal things. I watched people get more upset about their favorite sports team losing than about nuclear weapons being pointed at major cities. I saw believers spend more time planning their vacations than they spent praying for revival. The spiritual apathy was like a disease, and it was spreading faster than any physical plague. People had been lulled to sleep by comfort and prosperity, and they couldn't see the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. This is exactly what Jesus warned me about. I told Sarah one night after a particularly frustrating prayer meeting. People think because life is still relatively normal, because they still have their jobs and their houses and their routines, that everything is fine. They don't understand how quickly things can change. But we kept praying, kept sharing the message, kept believing that God could break through the indifference and wake up his people. If you've read this far, then you're one of the people God wants to reach. You're not reading this by accident. The fact that this testimony has come to your attention is part of God's plan to wake up his prayer army. I know some of you are skeptical. I know some of you think I'm just another guy claiming to have visited heaven. I understand that reaction. I would have been skeptical too before this happened to me. But I need you to consider this. What if I'm telling the truth? What if Jesus really did show me what's coming? What if the nuclear war I saw is really being planned right now? What if the spiritual darkness I witnessed is really advancing across our world? Can you afford to ignore this message? I'm not asking you to believe me because I'm special or because I have all the answers. I'm asking you to believe me because Jesus is real, heaven is real, hell is real, and prayer has the power to change the course of history. You don't have to become a full-time evangelist or quit your job to become a missionary. But you do need to start praying like you understand what time it is. You need to gather with other believers who share this urgency. You need to intercede for world leaders, for peace, for revival, for Jesus to return quickly. The prayer meetings in our little town have grown to over 200 people. We have groups meeting every day of the week now. We're connected with similar groups in over 30 countries. When we pray together, we can sense the spiritual atmosphere changing. We can feel the darkness being pushed back. But we need more prayer warriors. We need people who will take this seriously, who will make intercession a priority, who will cry out to God for mercy on our world. You have a choice to make right now. You can close this story and go back to your normal life, dismissing what I've shared as the fantasy of a traumatized soldier. Or you can ask God to show you if what I've said is true, and be willing to respond if He confirms it in your heart. Jesus told me that everyone who hears this message will be held accountable for how they respond to it. That's a sobering thought, but it's also an incredible opportunity. You could be one of the prayer warriors who helps delay or minimize the coming catastrophe. You could be part of the global prayer army that ushers in the greatest spiritual awakening in human history. But time is running out. The leaders who will make the decisions that lead to nuclear war are already in power. The weapons are already built. The spiritual forces of darkness are already mobilizing for their final assault. The only thing standing between our world and complete chaos is the prayer of the saints. And right now, there aren't enough saints praying with the urgency this situation requires. I've done what Jesus asked me to do. I've shared what I saw, warned about what's coming, called people to prayer. Now it's up to you to decide what you're going to do with this information. Will you be one of the ones who wakes up and takes your place in God's end times army? Or will you be one of the ones who sleeps through the most critical moment in human history? I want to end this testimony by telling you the exact words Jesus spoke to me just before I returned to my body. These aren't my words. These are His words, and they're for you. Tell my people that the time for casual Christianity is over. Tell them that their prayers have more power than they think. Tell them to stop being religious and prayer for the peace of the nations. Tell them that the end is near. Tell those who have not yet accepted me. Tell them to do so now because tomorrow might be too late. Tell them that I love them. Let them wake up and see that the words in the Bible concerning the last days is happening. Tell them that I'm not against my creation, but they know that the things which has been written will surely come to pass. This is the words I was told to share to anyone who would listen. Repent today and give your life to Christ. Jesus loves you and He is always ready to welcome you home. Accept Him today and be free. Thank you for watching. If you have been blessed by this testimony, please like this video, share to as many people you can reach, because by doing so, you are also saving a soul. Don't forget to share your thought in the comments section. Tell us what you think about this testimony and how it has blessed you. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more of this enlightening testimonies coming your way. Remain blessed.